Hi, my name is Ronan Murphy. I am a record producer and mixer based here in Los Angeles, California, but I'm lucky enough to get to make records all around the world. I'm also the founder of Recording Bootcamp, a small recording school really focused on getting people back to the fundamentals, really getting people to master the tools you need to make great records. I'm not sure I have a secret, since pretty much everything I know was just, shared to me by guys who've done this a lot longer than I have and things I've stumbled along. But one thing is to really understand how powerful a tool placement and distance is when it comes to a microphone. Because when you have a good front end with a good microphone, even just like 3 feet, meter out in front of the sound source, if the sound source is good and the mic is good, you're most of the way there to a great recording. And as you start to move the microphone and the sound source closer together, things get a little trickier because small differences in placement start to make really big, radical differences. So as you start to move closer, it can get a little tricky, but also more powerful. So if you're really close on a sound source, whether it's part of a drum, a guitar amp, bell of a saxophone, all those small differences can make huge changes in tone. So you can do small little things to change and manipulate the sound in a powerful way that's both grander and way more effective than anything you could do with EQ or a fancy plug-in later after the fact. One of the really important things with microphones, aside from just general good quality and where they can start to be a creative tool, is a great microphone can enhance or even sort of hide certain characteristics. So you want to make sure, especially when it comes to spectral things, that there's a good match between the microphone and the sound source. Obviously, if you have something that's potentially very harsh and shrill, you really don't want a microphone that's going to enhance a lot of the high frequency energy. And just on the opposite thing, if you've got a sound source that's really dull and murky and fat and maybe running the risk of not cutting through a mix, shifting to a microphone that can enhance and bring out some of that definition and clarity and brightness can go a long way. And so obviously you want to make the right choice and want to avoid the wrong choice whenever possible, because all the stuff we can do after the fact to fix that is never a free lunch. Once you start putting in EQs and different harm effects, things like that, they're never a free lunch. They have compromises, and getting the right microphone in the right placement is one of the few free lunches that we actually get when making a record. There's no downside to it. Well, ribbons to me are a really powerful thing to have in your toolbox, because the great thing about ribbons, and particularly ribbons in more kind of traditional designs, do a great job of capturing high frequencies in a really sort of pleasing and often forgiving way. Because a lot of times you have a situation where you've got a banjo or the top octave or a trumpet or a soprano voice really belting out, and they've got all this great energy, but it can actually get kind of harsh and unpleasant when you hear it recorded. And what I love about traditional kind of ribbon designs is they capture it, so you still get all that character of what's happening in the voice or the instrument, but it doesn't create it, record it in a way that's unpleasing, as a sharp contrast to something like a low-cost condenser, which can actually make that stuff worse. A really great traditional ribbon design will capture all that character in a way that's really pleasing and fit into a mix, and you won't have to try and use other solutions to fix it later, because there's a world of difference between capturing something that can be potentially too aggressive on the top end and trying to EQ it out later than getting it right at the mic, because that EQ always creates problems and it'll actually sort of take away a lot of that important character, where a great microphone choice will really capture it. And of course, a lot of ribbon microphones tend to have a really pronounced proximity effect too, which can be a really interesting creative tool if you have something that needs some extra warmth, particularly brighter things that need to take up more space in a mix. A lot of great ribbon microphones will have wonderful proximity effect that you can round those things out and let them have more gravitas in a mix in a way that's totally different than trying to boost it up with EQ and trying to boost up something that isn't really there. A recent record I just used the KU4 on was for an artist named Dave Nachmanoff, who's an artist in his own right, but also very well known as being the guitar player with legendary songwriter Al Stewart. And all of Dave's records in the past had been very much in the folk singer-songwriter genre. And the kind of record we wanted to make for him on this album was to bring in some more rock and roll elements to it. But we didn't want to completely divorce from his past. And we ended up using the KU4 on almost all of the acoustic guitars because the KU4 gave us a nice roundness that really complemented the sort of rock and roll elements we were bringing in. The bright cymbals, the big round bass, and more aggressive vocal stylings. And the roundness and the warmth of the KU4 really helped bridge that gap, both stylistically and sonically, sort of between the two worlds that we were trying to put together. I recorded it through what's now a prototype of what's now the Ventura mic pre by A Designs, which has an EQ built in. I think I maybe did 2 dB boost up around 12K, and I don't think I really did any other EQ on it in the mix. Maybe a little bit of carving to make some room for the bass, but I mostly doubled the guitars, panned them out, and they sat right where they needed to sit. And you know, that's a great mic. When the less you have to do in the mix, the better the tools are at the front end, and obviously vice versa. For me, my recording philosophy is to do my best to really kind of look at the songs, look at the musicians, look at the work of art we're trying to make, and try and create approaches that serve it. One of the huge mistakes I think a lot of people make is they sort of establish a set of guidelines and rules of this is how you make a record. And I think that's a disservice a lot of times to both the musicians, the fans, the songs, because every artist is different, every song is different, even the sonics are different of projects. Sometimes you want to get things really isolated so you can chop and manipulate them because that serves what's going on with that music. Other times you want to put things together and let microphones bleed into each other, let musicians sort of vibe off of each other, even, you know, let the sounds blend. You know, there's a different sound of having a guitar player in the room with the drums. The guitar will sound different, the drums will sound different. So I think my philosophy is to try to do my best to sort of sit back and look, you know, what the song needs, what the musician needs to get their best. And that latter one is a really important one because to me there's hardly any technical concern that outweighs a musician being comfortable and being able to deliver their best. So you end up doing tricks like, oh, let's just record musicians without headphones, singers without headphones. Let's cram everybody in a room together because that's how they play their best. Yeah, we'll deal with some bleed issues later and things like some technical things we might have to jump through, but none of those technical things are even remotely as important as getting that great performance that's worth recording in the first place. So when I'm teaching, I try and get people, again, not to look at, oh, they read something on the internet of this is how you record a band, but to try and be sensitive to what's going on in the room and just really get a vibe of what people are interested, what's going to stoke the creative fires, the great performances. I started the boot camp when I realized that there wasn't really much opportunity for people to learn what really goes into recording. There was obviously a lot of opportunities to learn Pro Tools or Cubase or some software, but kind of learning pull-down menus and how to engage plugins and edit, they don't really teach you the building blocks of recording. They don't teach you phase relationships, understanding dynamics, understanding how sounds complement each other when it gets into mastering. So I created this program that does just that. It really gets in at those fundamentals, and you know, it doesn't matter whether you're doing like heavy metal mixing on an SSL or doing jazz or chamber music in the box. It's really all the same set of building blocks and learning how to manipulate those. So what I did when I created Boot Camp was try to get something really focused that got people to truly understand those building blocks that are going to open up people's creativity to help them get the sounds they want.
Oh, Sheila won't be coming home. Sheila won't be coming home. Now Sheila won't be coming home tonight. Not tonight. Not tonight.